Okay, so we want to talk a little bit more about ethics, and we want to talk. I want to talk specifically about the readings that we were doing this week. We read a little bit from John Stuart Mill's Utilitarianism. We read a little bit about from Immanuel Kant's the metaphysics of morals, and we read a little bit from Noddings on care ethics. What I really want to start thinking about here is how ethics move into a tool that we can use, a framework for making decisions. You know, it's very easy to get lost in the abstraction of ethics. What is right and wrong, or how do we make our decisions? How do we determine what is an ethical choice, a choice that other people will accept and agree with? As Mill talks about, there's something about reason here that we need. We need something that sounds rational in order to be able to justify the choices we make. I'll go to what he says at the very start of utilitarianism. There ought to be some one fundamental principle or law at the root of all morality, or if there be several, there should be a determinate order of the precedence among them, and the one principle, or the rule, for deciding between the various principles when they conflict ought to be self-evident. Now, traditionally, this self-evident law is a law that was taken from religion or from belief systems where we said God was the one self-evident law. Others have said, well, it's not necessarily God, but it is might. Might makes right. Might, powerful. Hobbes, the powerful one is the one who makes the law. What Mill is saying is we need something a little bit more. We need something that is more rational, more straightforward, as a way of making decisions about what is right and wrong as far as our actions. We need an ethic. Immanuel Kant does something similar. He wants an ethic that is sort of taken apart from God, although you can see connections to God in what he has to say. It is a standard for what is truth as far as actions go. How do we know how to act? How do we know what is right and wrong? And then Nell Noddings as well wants an ethic, and she wants an ethic that comes apart from what the projects of Mill and Kant are doing. Something a little bit more. How do we know we are acting correctly, or how do we know we are acting in a way that is a good? Again, this is all sounds like abstraction, and it can make our brains cloudy. Why would you? Whoever thinks about this kind of stuff? Who wants to make decisions according to some kind of abstract notion of right and wrong? But the whole point of philosophers is that it's not abstract, that it is applicable, that you can create a framework for making decisions. Let's just think about a couple of examples. A morality, the sense of morals, right and wrong, is something that tells you what is right and wrong. It is something that we pretend like is ingrained within our humanity, where we just know what is right and wrong. Ethics, though, is an intellectual test, and it allows you to think out what are proper actions, what are appropriate actions in a given situation. It is a rational, philosophical approach to action. Ethics help you build a framework. They help you make decisions within a given situation. And this is where ethics, for me, is one of the most useful forms of philosophy, because it allows us to say, look at a given situation and say, is that proper? Let's just take a real quick example. We can just say, cheating is wrong. Cheating is bad. If you cheat, you are immoral. And we can say that in personal relationships. We can say that on your taxes. We can say that in a Philosophy 130 course on an exam. Cheating is wrong. But we can also now turn it and say, well, how do we know it's wrong? What is it that tells us it's wrong? Is it just some inner feeling, some inner devil on our shoulder or angel on our shoulder that tells us what is right and wrong? Or can we actually logically prove that it is wrong? Within a framework, we can start to build an ethic. And let's just quickly go through Mill and Kant and Noddings to see how that framework works. John Stuart Mill wants us to find an ethic that maximizes happiness, makes us all make sure that everybody can attain happiness, and that minimizes pain. Well, cheating is wrong because it maximizes pain and minimizes happiness. And while it may make an individual happy if they get a grade, in the end, the happiness is pretty short-lived because self-doubt moves in there. But the clear pain of cheating, for whatever it gives you in the moment, is far outweighs the happiness that results. You hurt the system, you hurt other people, you hurt yourself through cheating. It destroys that fabric. So it is clearly objectionable within that ethical framework. How does this work practically? Well, you are in a test and you have a decision to make. I could look over at this person's paper, if we're not in COVID. I could look over at this person's paper and I could copy their answers. Who's going to get hurt by that or who's going to get helped by that? You have a framework now you can apply. Am I helping happiness or am I hurting happiness? Am I stopping pain or am I inflicting pain? And by using that framework, you can then make a decision. What is the proper action at this point? Now, of course, there are all kinds of ways we can kid ourselves and lie to ourselves about the ethics of the situation. But if you look at the actual situation and assess it rationally, a rational thinking that others would agree with, there's not very much justification for cheating. Let's look at Kant. Kant has a categorical imperative that says you should act in a way that your action represents the ultimate moral law of the universe, or the ultimate truth, the end results of truth. So, in cheating, when you just look over and decide to cheat, if you do that, you are acting in a way that says everybody should always be cheating. Is that what you want when you cheat? When you look over and you decide not to cheat, you say everybody should always do their own work and take responsibility for it. Is that the world that you want to exist in? The decision you make, the framework is built on what is the ultimate law of the universe and how your action, if your action was to decide that law, are your actions ethical? We can look at Noddings and care. Care is about looking at somebody else and putting others' needs before your own, looking at other situations and considering them before you take action. Now, many, many things we do, care does not enter into it. But I would say in more things that we do, care should enter into it. So we can look at this cheating, and one thing that students often say when they cheat, or one thing people often say when they cheat is, well, I'm not hurting anybody, I'm just doing this little thing, it's not hurting. But we can look at it from an issue of care and ask, when you look over, are you caring for others? Are you caring for your instructor? Are you caring for your future employer? Are you caring for the student sitting next to you? Are you caring for the student next semester who will be sitting in your seat? How is it that you have violated the notion of care by acting on your impulse to cheat? Maybe you did that because somebody else wasn't caring about you, because we live in a society where people aren't caring enough, and you really want us to live in a society where people care. you should act in accordance with the idea of caring for others in order to be ethical. Let's try to apply this a little bit more directly, and have a more set way of applying these ideas to our lives. I'm going to share my screen and just show you the three frameworks we have here. Utilitarianism: making choices, living methodically to maximize pleasure and minimize pain. That is, you can apply utilitarianism to almost any ethical situation and make a decision. Will this choice that I make maximize pleasure and minimize pain? Now, sometimes you have to think years into the future or years in the past and decide, is this choice maximizing pleasure and minimizing pain? And in the case of a classroom, making a decision about cheating, you can see that it's not a very logical act as far as a utilitarian ethic goes. But it also applies to your individual life. The amount of work you decide to put into a class, the amount of work you decide to put into your degree. Making a utilitarian choice means that you are making a choice to maximize your own pleasure and others' pleasure and minimize pain. And in the case of of not doing all the work for a class, I mean, clearly sometimes you're maximizing pleasure by not doing all the work. But are you minimizing pain? Maybe not. Maybe that pain becomes more than you're willing to give up in order to have that pleasure. I'm not sure if that made sense. The categorical imperative is another way of thinking about how that applies to your life and how the choices that you make reflect on ultimate truths. And similarly, care ethics. How are you caring for yourself, for the world around you, for how your life is impacting others? What I'm suggesting here is that that these three frameworks can be applied in multiple situations, and there are other ethical frameworks. There are many ethical frameworks, but what you might think about doing is watch yourself through this coming week. Watch yourself doing the work for this course, or watch yourself making decisions on taxes, or watch yourself making decisions at your workplace, and try to apply an ethical framework when you make decisions. Do you want to use the utilitarian model? Do you want to use the categorical imperative? Do you want to use a care ethics? Try to apply that framework and stretch your thinking. Don't try to slide past it by coming up with some kind of alternate reality. Really think about, is the choice you're making ethical? Ultimately, whether or not you make that choice. We all make choices that are maybe not always ethical. But the exercise of practicing a framework is more important, I think, than even whether or not the choice you make is ethical. Because practicing that framework puts you into the practice of thinking ethically. And in doing that, you may find that the choices that you end up making solidify as a way of letting you know whether or not you're acting in the way that you want to act. We're running towards the end of the semester here. We are through our first exam, our first writing project. We've got multiple readings, multiple weeks through the class. I want to make sure that this class is still working for you and that you're still getting something out of it. And I'm a little concerned with some of the discussions that maybe not everybody's participating or getting something out of it. I would ask two things. One, I would ask you to think ethically about your performance in the class, But two, part of that ethical thinking might also mean that you need to make a choice, that you want to reach out to me, your instructor, and say, I'm not quite getting this, and I'm worried that others aren't. How can we change this? Or that you reach out to me as your instructor and say, I don't feel like I'm being cared for in a way that I need to be cared for in order to do well in class. Now, this doesn't mean necessarily that because you've made an ethical choice or made an assessment that I'm going to agree with that assessment, but at least we can talk about it and start to work out a better ethical means forward for you getting something out of this class. I hope you're doing well. Hope you have a good weekend, and we will talk to you again next week.